Well, it's a horrific murder case we've been covering for more than a year. When we left you at 5 o'clock, police still on the hunt for their main suspect, George Brinkman, for the murders of a mother and her 2 daughters. Investigator Sarah Goldenberg continues the story with episode 2, To Catch a Killer.
Friends and family left reeling after the violent murders of Suzanne Taylor and her daughters, Taylor and Kylie Pfeiffer.
It's horrible. It's horrible. That's probably the worst part of the job, is dealing with the tragedy afterwards.
Detectives with North Royalton Police and special agents with the FBI know every second counts as they track down the killer. 2 days after the murders, all signs point to Suzanne's childhood friend, George Brinkman. Here's Sergeant Floanne Ribicki, detective on the case.
He was very much in love with Suzanne, and he had a very close relationship to Taylor. Weird relationship, it almost was, because it was very, very close.
This undercover narcotics detective worked the case too. Police had a bolo out on George's van when they got a call from Stark County Sheriff's Office.
They had a homicide in their county, and George Brinkman in his black van with a red stripe was at the top of their list.
And it was like instantaneous. I basically hung the phone up, looked at our FBI tech agents and said, George Brinkman has his phone with him right now because I just talked to him 20 minutes, 30 minutes prior. So let's do it.
They pinged his phone, leading them to Brunswick.
I remember it because it was my kids were playing baseball at the time at the ballpark, and that was in that 20-mile radius, and it really freaked me out.
They found George at his friend Amy's house.
There was like hundreds of us, and we were staging and getting ready to go to the house.
When Amy arrived home, Amy said she got a very bad feeling about what was going on.
The SWAT team swooped in and got her away from the house.
She appeared genuinely horrified, absolutely, in total shock over what was happening. I 100% believe that he would have killed her.
Negotiators tried to talk George down.
And that's when George had a gun to his head and a bottle of liquor.
He was holed up in his room, ready for a long night. He had plenty of snacks and his medication for his diabetes, along with access to several guns.
He wasn't admitting anything at that point.
After 8 long hours, police bring George out in handcuffs. Hours later, 45-year-old George Brinkman, 6'2" and 165 pounds, sits down for an interrogation with FBI agents.
You have the right to remain silent.
They ask him about his background. George does odd jobs, distributing phone books, fixing cars, watching dogs. He crashes at friends' houses like Suzanne and Amy, other times living in his van. FBI agents ask him about the cast on his right arm.
This happened because of work Friday.
Okay.
I got angry, I got upset. Real wall wins every time.
Yeah.
I found that out.
They talk about Suzanne and her daughters.
I've known Sue since grade school. Even back in high school, it would never work anything other than friends. Me and Taylor had this bond. It was ridiculous.
Her nickname from Jurassic Park.
Well, she called me the Dino Man. Her name was Timmy from then on. I should have been there for Saturday. And that was it.
A few minutes later, FBI agents get to the point.
I can tell that you were very close to them.
Sue, that's Kylie and that's Taylor.
Did you have anything to do with any of this? What happened to them?
We're gonna.
I had to ask that to anybody.
I know you're.
I can tell that's.
No.
Okay.
They ask him to run through Saturday when he went to Suzanne's house. George texted her, "I kind of hope the girls are not there at 1."
I told her I wanted to discuss what was going on with me and work. I don't know, I was just having a bad day and I felt like Amy's house. I'm sorry, but can I have a cigarette?
George pulled up the driveway and Taylor and Kylie were there.
And then they said something about wanting to go to the mall, so I gave them $20 to go eat. Say, hey, can you give me about maybe 2:30 to talk to your mom?
George says he had a surprise for Suzanne he didn't want the girls to see. Money for college.
And withdrew $1,600 and put it in 2 envelopes.
He said he was going to skip town that day, but Suzanne changed his mind.
She convinced me that running away from my problems will never solve them.
George says she talked about going on a date that night, even though she had just broken up with Scott. But earlier that day, Suzanne told him in a text she won't be dating for a long time.
When she starts talking about her love life, I just kind of zone her out.
George says Taylor and Kylie got a flat tire, but someone helped them with it, and he saw them pull in the driveway when he was leaving around 4 p.m.
And then Dale called me yesterday with his line of questioning.
What do you mean?
Just the way he's trying to confirm my timeline too. Yeah, I'm being blamed for it.
No, not being blamed for it. I'm going to ask you if you have anything to do with it.
Hell no. But by the who did it, I'm sorry. There ain't gonna be no trial. You don't take Timmy from me. You don't take my best friend from me that I grew up with, or other daughter. If I would have stayed 15, 20 minutes, another 40 minutes.
Nearly 2 hours into the interview, FBI agents string George along.
You know what I say, right? Okay?
But they move on to the standoff.
I wouldn't be in a situation where I would retrieve a firearm and then
I had
about,
it in the room with me when I saw them.
Listen to me.
I know.
Listen, look at me. Look at me. I wouldn't go to a window and put it to my head.
I see how it looks.
Here's what I'm getting at, George.
I need a cigarette right now, or I can't talk anymore.
Next, George takes a polygraph. The results?
It was considered inconclusive. Something happened. Only you know the real truth of what happened. Let's talk about what happened, why it happened, and then we'll come back tomorrow and talk more on it. So tell me why it happened. What happened?
You have to respectfully ask to have a lawyer.
Left alone in the interrogation room, he starts mumbling to himself.
Something's no. No. This ain't right.
After hours and hours of questioning from the FBI, what does it take to make George Brinkman crack? His shocking confession, plus what was his motive? I'm Sarah Goldenberg. That's next on